Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Poly Side Eye with me and Jared. This is episode 51, and we're just going to get straight into it. So, Amanda Seales, as y'all know, actress, comedian, radical, it seems. She was invited on a series called Surrounded on the Jubilee Network. You can find it on YouTube. Just look it up, Jubilee. It's a debate show where you have one person with a defending argument surrounded by people ready to oppose it. Candace Owens was on this. It was her versus 20 feminists. And for this one, Amanda Seales versus 20 Black conservatives. Now, I was trying to get you to watch it, Jared. And, I know Amanda Seales from, my ex-employer, and I know how she is. And, when it comes to politics, sometimes, look, she's like a broken clock. She's right every so often, twice a day. So, this isn't to skewer her, but I really just thought the conversation I thought it was entertaining. Enlightening, I'm not sure, but I did learn some things. Now, before I get, your opinion, I actually think this is the lane that she needs to stay in, because this is like people literally in line to argue with her. Like, it's kind of like, you're letting your dog in the backyard just run around until it tires itself out. Like, this is a wet dream for her, arguing with people. So I think she needs to stay in this lane. I thought it was great. Let's see. Someone said we're freezing. Are we freezing? This is a live show, by the way. I don't see you freezing. Oh, you're freezing a little bit.
I'm freezing. I didn't do anything.
Oh, I just noticed you were freezing a bit just now. Okay, well, you're good now.
Oh, okay. I think it was just I wasn't moving. I was just like,
okay. But yes. So we both saw this hour-and-a-half long show. So of course, I want to pick your brain about it. I want to know like what you thought on the claims that she brought. And first and foremost, I want you to remind the audience your credentials for you to speak on the matter, because lowest of keys, I have always wanted you to debate Amanda Seales on anything. So yes, tag Amanda Seales. And tell him to debate my friend Jared. But yes,
interest in debating Amanda Seales or really anybody. It's just not, and not in a format like that. Like in a format like that, it's just who can get the most, who can get in their licks essentially is what it is. And I just don't really find that productive. But I'm not really one to, I don't care about credentials and degrees and all that stuff. But if people feel like they need to know that.
Humble. He's so humble.
If people feel like they need to know these things to find me a bit more credible, I guess. I got my PhD in political science from Duke. I studied political economy, trying to really understand the history of capitalism, Black political thought. I teach Black political thought. I teach intro to political theory. So I teach these things. So this is kind of my wheelhouse. And so I do think I have some, let's say, provocations to offer to people. I don't really have answers because I don't think anybody has the answers, but hopefully I can give us some things to think about.
Yes. I just wanted, for people that, may have just clicked on and they don't know you, because, we have our usual audience, our classroom, but I just want to make sure like you are definitely the one that I would want to hear on these topics. Now, first and foremost, is Amanda Seales a radical? Because if you've watched Poli Sci-Fi, y'all, this is the real radical right here. Like my friend Jared, like I think if you've seen any of our 50 episodes, but what do you think?
So, the term radical is interesting. So it really depends on what you, and so somebody in the chat already said, like, I'm too logical for this, which is true. Part of the reason I try to be aggressively logical is because I feel like our society is like against logic. It's like everything is about feels and vibes. And I'm just like, no, I want us to think sometimes. Like, I don't really care. everybody's feelings are valid. I get all of that, but like sometimes we need to set that aside and try to, as far as we can, to like try to think about these things critically. Now, with that being said, like the term radical is interesting because I take a very literal interpretation of what that means. And so, like, if you go back to math class, what did radical mean? It meant to get to the root of something. Like you're trying to understand like what the root of an issue is, and I guess in this case, maybe how you could address it. So whether or not you're radical really depends on how you assess the problem. Like, what do you actually think is the problem? So if you think the problem with capitalism is that there are billionaires and that we should just make it more fair for people to become billionaires, then you might have a different kind of identification of the problem and obviously a different solution than I would. I don't think that's the problem. I don't think the problem is, just allowing Black people to accumulate as much wealth as white people. That's not the issue to me. To me, the issue is actually the way in which capitalism alienates us, in the sense that we are often forced to do labor that we don't want to do. We spend most of our time doing that. We can't pursue the things that we're passionate about, that are interested in, unless there is a job available to us. So there's all these ways in which capitalism kind of structures our decision making for us, which to me is unfree. Like, I don't think that is freedom. And I think, so for me, the question is much bigger than probably a person like Amanda is gonna, pick up the question or like try to interpret the issue. So I don't want to say that she's not a radical, but based on my reading of how she views the issues, and again, I don't want to put words in her mouth. Like, she's never explicitly kind of said her own kind of political philosophies. Like, she just said she's not liberal, that she's not this, but she's never really saying what she is. And so it's kind of hard to be like, she is or isn't radical. She calls herself radical. So like, I take her at her word. So what does she think of radical as meaning? I think in my view, I would think she thinks radical means capitalism without any of the bad stuff, particularly the bad stuff that affects Black people, and just giving Black people an equal share of the capitalist pie. Like, to me, that strikes me as kind of her vision of like what liberation, or we'll talk about how I think these terms are just, are bandied about, but we don't really think about what we mean. Again, this is just my interpretation. That's all I can go based on, is because in the video, she didn't actually articulate a positive vision of the world. It was just, I'm not this, I'm not that. So yeah, I'll stop there.
So what did you think of the overall conversation, the video? Like I said, I thought it was entertaining. I mean, I learned a bit, and there were some things I agree with. I mean, I mostly agree with what Amanda was saying compared to, who she was debating with. I mean, it was a little bit loud in the beginning. It was a lot of yelling. But what did you think? And was it a productive conversation by the end of?
I mean, but to be fair, I don't think it was meant to be productive. It was meant to be entertaining. It was meant to get people to open it, to click it, to like it, to share it, to comment on it, to engage. I mean, so
it's already at like 600,000 views.
So from that standpoint, it did what it was supposed to do. I don't think it was designed in any way to get people to like actually think, to actually take a step back and really mull over what we mean when we say these things like freedom and radical and liberation and things like that. So from that standpoint, no, I don't think it was productive from an intellectual standpoint. Now, I do think we do need a platform or a place where we can actually, hold on one second, I need to get a little squig.
Oh, yeah. Very loud, and Jared is not about to have someone scream in his face.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So really the question is like, there's always been, I tweeted about this, it's kind of going viral, but so one thing I really, really, really try to impress upon my students in my Black political thought class is that speaking as Black people as a monolith, and everyone will say, oh, Black people aren't a monolith. But then when the rubber meets the road, like, we don't actually want to deal with the fact that Black people are not a monolith. And what I mean by that is like, Black people have always had, especially in the US context, where the US as really the U.S. is an idea. Like we talk about America like it's a thing, but it really is an idea. And I think it's important to hang on to that because America is an idea, people have had different ideas about what America represents, including Black people. So like you have some people like Booker T. Washington who are just like, we don't really care about like having power. Like we just want to be able to like, we being Black people, we want to be able to work and like have our own and like mind our business. Then you have some people who are much more active in trying to completely overhaul the political economy. So you have Black communists, you have Black socialists, you have Black feminists, Black radical feminists who also had a very strong critique of the gendered nature of capitalism. And even within like Black America, you've had Black liberals who are essentially the DEI people. So you've had all of these different like ideologies that over the span of like multiple centuries, these people have always debated and had conversations about like what it would take to like actually improve the plight of Black people in America. But because they differed on what that actually would look like in practice, we've always there was a whole, journal of Negro education where they talked about the role of, Black people in the public school system. And should Black people have their own schools, or should they be for integration? Should they be for like all these things are on the table? And like, that's the type of conversations we need to be having. Like, not whether or not Black people are for or against liberation. Like, they all are. But what liberation means is an open question, and it has been. And so I feel like this discussion didn't really delve into the really rich, and I do mean rich, a very rich lineage of Black thinkers of all sorts. And one thing I really bothers me is that when people just outright dismiss like Black capitalism or Black conservatism as like nonsensical,
because you immediately like say, "Oh, you are COON," or
that's really not helpful, because there is a discussion to be had there. Like, and I think if we're not even willing to entertain it, like, what do we have to lose at this point? Like, at this point, everything should be on the table. Everything should be up for consideration. Everything should be up to dispute at this point. Like, the historical record is ambiguous enough on all these things to at least let it be an open conversation. And so, like, the fact that we don't have a platform or a space to do that, to me, I think is just really, really unfortunate, honestly.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, y'all, is we're going to go through each of the claims. There were 4 of them that Amanda had, and she had to defend this argument. What I want to know is, what do you think, Jared, like on the claim? And do you think, just after watching the video that, Amanda proved her claim? Okay, so the first claim is it's undeniable that reparations are just and necessary.
Just and necessary. So I don't think anything is undeniable. So I wouldn't make that bold of a claim. I don't like the framing of the question. I think I would repose the question and ask, what is the function of reparations? Like, what are reparations really trying to accomplish? So in the video, I didn't really think is a very helpful distinction, but she makes this distinction between reparations and remuneration. So she's saying reparations is about actually acknowledging the harms that were done to Black people. I'm guessing she means like a government statement or apology. I don't really know. She didn't say. And then the remuneration is paying Black people for the labor that they were not paid for because they were enslaved. Now, so there's 2 ways to look at this. There's like, I guess, the moral question. I'm not really interested in moral. I think we try to make politics into something about morals, and I just don't think that's really useful or very productive. I'm always telling you, like, I get annoyed when people try to turn the law into something that's like litigating morality, and I'm like, no, the law is not there to like litigate morality. The law is there to essentially
support people.
No, the law is there to adjudicate property relations. Like, that's what it's there for. And so, like, trying to use the law to like essentially impose values on people. It's just like not. It's just not it. So I'm unclear about like what she thinks the function of reparations is. And so we've kind of talked about this before. Let's imagine that for whatever reason, somehow the federal government decides that every Black person in America is going to get a cash payment of some amount. I don't know, $500,000, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that and leave the whole rest of the like structure of American society intact, essentially what you're going to get is a hyperinflation of the sort that Germany saw in the 1920s that led to the Nazi regime taking power. Like it would be because the banks would see that as like evidence to essentially just like use it as an opportunity to like grab some of this money. And so like my whole thing is like reparations would have to be considered within a broader kind of a broader assessment of the society. Like I wouldn't want reparations, but just leaving everything else in place, because I actually think Black people would be worse off after that. That might be a hot take.
It is.
I just think as long as you're going to let Wall Street control essentially the trajectory of American society, then the whole reparations discussion is a moot point. Like to me, you're putting the cart before the horse. Like I think that there are, let's say, more fundamental structural kind of concerns that should be dealt with, like again, finance and real estate and things like that, being, corralled in some type of way. So like if you're not gonna deal with that, then like the reparations is just gonna like again, I think it would be a hyperinflation of the sort that would essentially like devalue most of that anyway. So is the whole point
oh, sorry, go.
Like is the whole point of reparations is just to essentially let Americans just consume as much as and accumulate as much wealth as white people? Because again, if that's your vision of like liberation or just society, then I'm like, but again, I can't tell you you're wrong. Like that's just not my own ideological position. So to say outright that it's undeniable, I think is kind of questionable. But
it sounds good on paper, though. I mean, everyone Black getting $500,000, but then you do bring up a good point where, like, well, what happens, like, logistically in the America that we're in when that happens, and things can go worse than, the intentions that it's supposed to bring.
So, yeah, because people don't understand how money works. Money's not a thing. Like it's not tangible. Money is essentially an abstraction that represents some type of relationship between, let's say, merchant, the consumer, debtor, and whatever. It's just like it's a abstraction. So like money is just an abstraction that is being pegged onto some type of relationship of debt, honestly. And I'm not going to get too deep into that, but like if you don't really understand kind of the philosophy of money, and when I teach my intro to political theory class, we spend weeks reading about the philosophy and the history of money and like what it actually is. I'm putting air quotes around it because it's not something tangible. If you don't understand all of this, then you really can't have, to me, really can't have a real discussion about reparations, because if you're talking about putting them into practice, like you really have to understand how finance and debt and money and all of these things work.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I am for reparations, but just for the sole purpose of just giving people, Black people, an equal playing field, which I still think is uneven right now. So I don't know how to make that work, or how to make that happen if just writing a blank check like isn't going to help. So I don't know.
When we say an even playing field, like what do we mean by that exactly? This is what I'm saying. So like we say things like equal opportunity or equal playing field, but like what does that mean? How would we know if we accomplish that? Like tactically, how would we know?
I mean, because like we're in America where clearly there's white supremacy and white privilege, to where still like white people have like a better chance of succeeding than Black people.
So to that point, would we live in an equal society? What if we could like run the numbers and see that Black people had just as much wealth as white people? Black people were, you know, some people would say like equality would be, we have just as many white people as in jail as Black people, just as many rich Black people as rich white people, just as many, you know, Black people who can own a house as white people. And it can't just be the owning the house, like the house has to be just as equally valued. So what we just need statistically across every possible like social measure, just ensuring that.
Like I said, I don't know how we can enact this or how
about enacting. Before you even get to the point of enacting, we have to have some idea of like what we mean when we say these things. And this is one of my big critiques of the video, in the sense that there was no, you gotta really do, so in game theory, there's this thing called backward induction. So like what you do is you start from the outcome and you work your way back to where you are. So like, that's really what we need to do. We need to backward induce our way to where we're trying to go. So like, before we even get into a question of policy, like we need to know like what, if we could wave a wand and create the exact world we want to see, what would it look like? Okay, then work towards that. But I feel like we don't do that. We just, so we're arguing over tactics, but like to what end? Like what is the actual aim? Like what are we striving for?
Yeah.
People in the chat want to like give me some indication of what that is. I think I would actually like to know.
Yeah. So one person says the problem with that is perception won't necessarily change just because money does.
Perception of what exactly?
And how are we going to get poor whites to be like, yes, give Black people a check and not give them anything?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think if you really want the United States to have a pretty aggressive, even more aggressive fascist takeover, like do that. And again, I'm not saying that reparations are good or bad. Like, I don't really think in those terms. The question is like, what is the function? Like, what is it trying to achieve? Like reparations, again, are a means to some end, but it's never clear to me what the end is. To me, again, I could be.
So then someone says land, affordable education, equal wages, governmental health insurance for all. That all sounds great.
So what do we mean by land? Just like giving people a plot of land? What is affordable? Like who gets to determine what's affordable or not? Like, what do we mean by equal wages? Like, does everyone make the same amount? Like, it's just, again, these are questions that, again, they're hard questions. And I've always posed these questions to my students because it is not even that I'm expecting people to answer them. I don't have to answer these questions. I'm just trying to get people to actually think through what's being said to realize how complex and really complicated, honestly, it actually is.
So let's get to the next claim. And time out, we have over 100 people in the room. So please like the video and please share,
That would help. Is that my
yes.
Is it your finger? Is it your index finger?
It comes from ballroom community, and it's just like this. It's
But was that like the proper context? Like, was that to me to express my excitement? Should I do that, or is that like?
Sure, why not? Anywho, I'm excited that y'all are interested. But anyway, so the next claim is Black on Black crime is a result of underinvestment and over policing. Thoughts?
Okay, again, this is another instance when I would reframe the question. I really don't, I want us to move away from like Black on Black crime as a concept because I think it's distorting. People typically, if you're going to kill somebody, you're typically going to kill people that are most, and so this is a point where Amanda actually, I think, made a good point. Like she was like, well, she was like, yeah, like, because one of the girls she was debating with was like, well, I care about Black on Black crime because I've had people in my family, I think her dad or something had been like killed by a Black person. And so Amanda was like, well, how often did he come in contact with white people? And the woman was like, well, mainly it was Black people, but he did. Essentially, Amanda's point was like, people kill people that they're proximate to. And because we live in a segregated society, most white people kill white people, most black people kill black people, most whatever. It's really more of a, I mean, there is a racialized element to it, but that's really not the point. The point is like most violent crime happens in first poor communities. And because of the history of racism, Black people are disproportionately represented among the poorer parts of our country. It's true. And what we do though, or what people do, especially conservatives, is they interpret this and, like to Amanda's point, they pathologize it and use it as evidence that, you know, Black people lack something. They lack a strong male figure in the home, and which all of these things maybe they do, but like that's just not the point. So again, going back to the question of like, what does it mean to be radical? I'm always like, what do you think is the root problem? And I really appreciated Amanda doing this as well, because she would ask some of the people like, well, what do you think the problem is? And they'd be like, oh, the problem is like men putting their seed in women and like not staying with them. And I'm like, okay, but even if that were an issue, let's say there was an issue of, I'm willing to grant that maybe there is an issue of, you know, men impregnating women and not staying with them. Again, I don't think that's what we need to be concerned about per se, but like, let's just assume that they perceive that as being the problem. My follow-up question would be like, well, why do some people do that, but others don't? So like, there has to be something in society that's doing that. It's not like people come out of the womb doing that. It's like, and so like my whole thing is like, okay, so if we can acknowledge that there are certain social conditions that lead to certain types of behaviors, like rather than just like pathologize it and turn it into like, oh, something's wrong with these people, which is invariably going to turn into racism. Yeah. Why don't we actually try to like reckon with what is it in our society that leads people to behave in these sorts of ways? And is it something that we could do to mitigate against that? That should be the question to me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I do agree that she did, I think, handle herself well in defending that point, because I really hated how the conservatives kept bringing up like, I guess white, like policemen killing African Americans and comparing that to black on black crime is, you know, that's the bigger deal than police officers killing Black people. You know, I just hated when they brought up that point. Let's see. Domestic violence rates are equal across all economic and racial lines. So are there differences in innate propensities?
So this might be a hot take coming from me, especially because I'm technically a social scientist. And again, I'm going to give Amanda her props again, but like we really have to. So Mark said at one point that it was going to get to a point where we were just going to be living like in a world of abstractions, in the sense that everything is just like all of these like numbers and statistics and data and whatever, and these data statistics can be manipulated so easily, like yes. Depending on where you start the time. So you see this a lot in the news. So like the news will be like, oh, the stock market like plummeted 500 points. And I'm like, this is like the lowest it's been in like 6 months. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but if you actually expand that out like half a century, you could actually get a much different kind of like interpretation of the issue. And so like people will always slice and dice data to make the point that they're trying to make. And so like, I'm not saying you shouldn't use statistics or you shouldn't rely on them to like substantiate your point, but like, that's really not the issue. Like because again, there's a lot of distortions, especially by, you know, government data. In fact, the last few years, the government itself has been saying repeatedly, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they've been saying like, oh yeah, like we're not necessarily how good like our data quality is. And this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, like so much policy is built off these data. Same with the census. The census has all sorts of problems. So even the official government data is like, by the government's own admission, not necessarily as robust and as dependable as we would like to think. Of course, they're not going to say that publicly, but you know, people would jump on me for this, but like Trump kind of does have a point about like the unemployment figures. Like the way that they calculate the unemployment data are like very, very problematic to say the least. And so, yeah, just be skeptical of any data you see. I don't care who's reporting it, honestly. Even I literally go straight to the government's website, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Federal, all these places. I go directly to them. And even then, I'm still like, don't know if I still fully trust this.
Statistics are narrative interpretations.
Period.
So the next claim, claim 3, was systemic racism isn't a theory. It's our lived reality backed by data and history. There are some people that think that there is no such thing as systemic racism.
I don't really like that term. I don't like systemic racism or structural racism or institutional. I don't really. If my students use that term, I always circle it and we have a chat, because not that I think that, again, I think it's distorting in the sense that when people say structural, first off, I already think of racism as structural in the sense that racism is ideological, in the sense that racism is reproduced in the way that we live our lives. And so, like, it's not just a matter of, like, having bad attitudes or anything like that. Like, it is based on the things we take for granted. It's based on the way we've been socialized. It's based on the rituals we engage in socially. It's based on all of these things. And so I'm like, I don't know if structural racism or institutional racism is really going to get you very far if what you're trying to do is, like, come up with some, like, detailed understanding of, like, how things happen. So if you're trying to understand, racial slavery as an institution, I don't think structural racism is going to get you very far. Or if you're trying to understand the rise of, let's say, prison populations in the mid-20th century, I don't think structural racism is going to get you very far. Like, I would probably be a little less reticent to use that term if people use it as, like, an entry point. But people use it as, like, the end of the discussion. And I'm just like, no, like, structural racism. And also when people use it as an object, or they say structural racism does something, like, that's structural racism can't do it. It's an abstraction. Like, I want us to move out of the realm of just thinking about these things abstractly and actually try to understand the precise histories of how things came to be. And so, like, I just thought the whole framing of the question was a little...
It seemed like you don't like the framing of any of these questions.
No. And so, I teach intro to political theory. Some people call it political philosophy. But one thing I always say in that is, like, the questions we ask are really important, because how we frame a question or how we ask something really is going to shape, like, how we actually engage moving forward. So if, like, you frame a question with certain assumptions baked into it, or if you have, like, a leading question, or you set things up as, like, one of the persons was asking Amanda Seals, like, oh, like, it was a leading question, like, oh, do you think it's problematic that... I'm like, no, you don't ask questions like that. Like, you want questions to be open-ended enough so you could actually have a thorough discussion. You don't want it to be a narrow, like, either or question, because as we know, like, very few things in the world are binaries. But what liberal capitalism is there to do in particular is turn everything into a binary. It's always good or bad, or right or wrong, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, capitalism, socialism. It's always black or white, male or female. Like, I mean, all of these things. I mean, when extended to the gays, top, bottom, like, everything is just, like, these annoying binaries. And we all know from personal experience that very few things we do in the world can be reduced to an either or that way. So, like, I just generally don't like the narrowing of questions. I just think it's limiting.
Yes and no questions leave no room for nuance. Let's see. And the nonverbal part of communication absolutely deserves criticism and processed with discretion. I agree. Structural racism is a conclusion reached when other individual causes have been shown as incomplete answers.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. It's just like, oh, like, we know we live in a racist society, so if there's anything we can't explain, or structural racism really emerged. And so if you've ever read the book Black Power by Stokely Carmichael, in that book, like what they talk about is, you know, the term institutional racism emerges in the 60s because in the mid 20th century, the dominant or the predominant understanding of racism was essentially that it was like a psychological distortion, it rooted in ignorance. I talk about this quite a bit in my book, in the sense that people thought that racism, again, was like ignorance that just could be corrected with education. So like one reason that there are all these education reforms in the mid 20th century is because the idea was that, oh, well, white people are racist because they have all these ignorant ideas about Black people. And if they understood the full humanity of Black people, they would correct these ignorant ideas, and these ignorant ideas wouldn't manifest itself in racism anymore. That was kind of the predominant idea. But then after the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement, what you saw is that there's still, surprise, we still live in a racist society, even though we had, you know, passed all of these pieces of legislation trying to deal with what they thought was the issue, which was ignorance among white people, prejudicial attitudes, essentially. And so in that book, Black Power, Stokely Carmichael intervenes to say, no, like racism isn't just about bad apples. It's not about just individual attitudes. It's actually about how certain institutions, within the institutions, they crafted policies and implemented policies that over time, like, impacted Black people in a negative way that didn't happen to white people. So they'll point to like redlining. They talk about this too. So like the redlining.
Just going to bring that up.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan. I mean, redlining was a thing, that obviously, but I think the way we talk about redlining is we're kind of missing the point, which is that the federal government essentially just told the real estate industry to craft the types of policies they needed to become profitable again after the Great Depression. And the real estate industry was like, well, we can't have if you know how real estate works, you know that everybody we only value certain things in capitalism because we don't value other things. Like it's a relationship in the sense that you know what's the ghetto because you know where the rich part of town is. But if everything looked like the rich part of town or everything looked like the ghetto, you'd have no way of evaluating the relative value of these areas. And again, I'm not even saying you should be doing that, but like if you're a real estate company, your whole reason for being is to essentially craft some type of way of like valuing land for the purposes of obviously making a profit. And so the real estate industry is the one who created the whole policy of redlining. And the government was like, well, we also forget that we didn't have this like deep government bureaucracy that we have now. And so like the federal government didn't even have the capacity to really carry out a lot of these initiatives anyway. So like they essentially gave the real estate industry kind of carte blanche to do whatever policies that we're going to make them profitable again, because real estate is a very key component of American capitalism, in the sense that the real estate industry crashes, it takes down everybody else with it. And so like that,
yes.
You know, we can quibble over that, and you should. That's why I'm always advocating for socialism. But the reality is, this is how it works. And so like redlining was a real estate creation, but everybody has read that stupid Color of Law book and just are just like, oh no, it's just the government who did that. I'm like, it's deeper than, it's more complex than that. So yeah. Up there.
So before we get to claim 4, I want you to plug your book that you're actually writing, because I want you to plug the book. And of course, when the book comes out, you're going to come on here and talk about it. And hopefully everyone, will meet you where, I'm pretty sure you're going to be on the book tour soon.
I don't know about soon, but so my book is finally under contract. The title I'm still working on the title. Right now, it's Equality Without Opportunity: Why Education Cannot Solve Racial Inequality. And in the book, I offer a historical examination of federal education policy from 1947 to 1974 in particular, because that's where you saw like the vast majority of all of the educational programs we think about: Head Start, Upward Bound, student loans, like all of this is kind of passed in this 30-year period. And so I do like a really deep dive historical kind of examination of like why these policies were formed, why it is that education was pushed or advanced as the way to deal with racial inequality. I also incorporate a lot of Black thought. So, Black people in the mid 20th century, Black socialists, Black capitalists, Black liberals, all of them, to get a sense of like what their thoughts were about the education system being the way to deal with racial inequality. And so from there, I then, give all of this historical context to show why it is that a lot of the issues that we're confronted with in the education system today are really rooted in this like mid 20th century kind of period. A lot of these ideas, I think, are way outdated. I think the issue with society is that ideas move way more. Our ideas about things there's always a lag. Like, we're still thinking about things as though it's like 1970. We don't realize it, but I'm trying to show us that we are. And what I'm trying to implore us to do is to like leave some of those ideas behind, and let's try to imagine together a new way of like doing these things.
Well, I cannot wait. So, claim 4, Black conservatism fails to address the needs of the working class. I think this was my least favorite claim because, I don't know, I just think conservatism in general doesn't address the needs of the working class. Capitalism, right?
So first, I want to say, answer Rich the Fish's question. Yes, I am. Actually, I try not to be prescriptive about things because I'd rather think with people. But I do offer in the closing chapter some things that I think that we could do both immediately, because we live in this microwave economy, consumer economy, where people feel like, if they can't get the change they want in 2 years before the next midterms, it doesn't matter. So I'm trying to deal with this kind of immediacy that people want. So I try to offer some things that we could do now versus some things that I think are going to be much more generational. So like things most of us here probably won't live to see, but things that we should start, if we have kids, we have people younger than us that we care about, like at least start broaching these conversations. So maybe the next generation, they'll have more, more wherewithal, more desire to actually do something more transformative. So I try to do both. Okay, so to come back to the question about Black conservatism. So I don't love the term. People are gonna be like, what do you like? You don't like anything. So I'm not a huge fan. Okay, everybody is conservative about something. So again, I'm very literal about this. What do we mean when we say conservative? Like, the root word of conservative is conserve. So like that means we're trying to maintain something. So like when we say that someone's conservative, what exactly are they trying to maintain? It could be all sorts of things. Maybe for, let's say, the Proud Boys, maybe they're trying to maintain white supremacy. If you are Elon Musk, maybe you're trying to maintain American hegemony when it comes to capitalism. If you are, so it just really depends, like, what exactly are you trying to conserve? So to say that Black conservatism can't work is kind of like, well, work in what way? Like, again, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, maybe it might be the case that for some Black people in the working class, an immediate way for them to improve their position is in their material position is to, I don't know, do crypto and like get some of that money to like start a small business. I'm not saying it is, but you can't just rule it out completely. Now, do I think it could address the needs of most Black people in America? No, I don't. Not Black capitalism. I don't want to say Black conservatism because we're conservative about all sorts of things. I'm conservative about the fact that I have finally admitted that I don't think I think music has gotten worse. That's a very conservative position to have.
I agree.
So again, we're all conservative about some things. I saw somebody the other day that was like, oh, like I could just never imagine, like they went to church and they saw people wearing like, track pants and like sweatpants and stuff. And they're just like, oh no, I could never do that. Like church is supposed to be a place where you come in your Sunday's finest. Okay, that's a conservative position. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel that way. We've just gotten to this position in America, especially. It's just, that's why I'm like, these terms are all distorting. Like, we should just stop using them because people hear conservative and they think Ronald Reagan. And I'm just like, that's not really helpful. You also could be a liberal conservative. You could be a socialist conservative. There's all ways that you can be conservative and espouse other ways of like organizing the economy. So like, just like that's just not. Again, I would reframe the question.
What did you think about the brief diaspora conversation? Like a lot of people latched onto this clip. I want to play it for y'all right quick. I think we can do that on YouTube, but this is what she said, and everyone's like, you know, you tell them, sis, you know.
The daughter of an immigrant, it is imperative that Black people from other places understand the disparate difference that they exist from Black people in the United States. It is not the same. Period. And ultimately, the best effort that we can do as a diaspora is to lead in understanding, not in judgment. So when I am talking to somebody from Sudan, from the Congo, from Angola, I am listening to understand their experience, not to undermine it. And I refuse to allow anybody from Grenada, from Angola, from any other place to come and try to undermine the experience of Black Americans.
There. I mean, she kind of ate with that a little bit, right?
No, I don't really care for the diaspora wars. Like, here's the rub. Capitalism is a global system. It's not just an American system. It's not just like the problem is global. And so I don't actually agree with this. I don't think the experiences are that different. Sure, like there might be cultural differences. I'm not saying that. I think if let's say somebody who immigrated here from, let's say, Kenya at some point later in their life, relative to someone who was born in, the Deep South or in New York, sure, they're going to have different kind of like what one might say phenomenological. So like their experience, how they experience things is going to be different. And so like, but the reason that you can't, in my view, the reason you can't put too much stock in experience, especially when it comes to like policy, is because we know that experience isn't a given. Like what we experience is in fact shaped by all sorts of conditions. It's shaped by, again, the way we've been socialized, the way that we've been, the area in which we live, like our knowledge about things. Like there's all sorts of things that can shape our experience. So like really, the whole experience question to me is just not the point, because everybody's going to feel like their experience is the valid one, not because they are narrow-minded or because they're myopic, but because that's the way, again, phenomenologically, that's the way that experience operates. And so like, the question is like, why do we need to know, like, what are we doing with this understanding of these experiences? Are we trying to craft policy out of it? Because if that's the case, I have huge issues with that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't like how, it's all divisive in my opinion, but I didn't like how, so I think one of the people were like, well, my mom came from this place. My dad came from this place. He came over here as an immigrant and, he made it. So why can't this poor African-American, why can't they make it? Like, why do we need to give them a handout when my immigrant father came here and he didn't need one? He worked hard and he did what he had to do to achieve the American dream. That's what I meant by that type of framing.
So here's the thing. I've said this before. I think most Black people, irrespective of you were born here or if you immigrated here, I think most Black people in America are Republicans, not like Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump Republicans, but like Republicans from the like classic way, the Republican ideology of the 19th century, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, that type of like mindset, which is very much about, the value of work and the value of being self-sufficient and like, the not having to subordinate yourself to somebody else. We forget that for like most of American history, like selling your labor in exchange for a wage was viewed as like maybe a little bit better than chattel slavery, but not much. And we've just completely lost all of that. And so like, I think most Americans are like, their ideology, I think, is I'm trying to work as hard and hustle as much as I can so I can maybe leave my kids something before I die. I think that's how most people, I don't think most Americans want to be on welfare, even if they are in positions where they could actually get welfare. I think most people feel too, because of the way you've been socialized to into this Republican ideology. I think most people resent this. I mean, I remember growing up, I grew up in a blackity black environment. I literally did not have a conversation with a white person who wasn't like somebody I saw at like a store, like the cashier at Walmart or something, until I was in middle school. So like my whole socialization was like very black.
And LSU for me, like me being in New Orleans, 99% black.
So you should know, like the kids used to make fun of the kids who they suspected of being on like Section 8 or on welfare, or they weren't any type of assistance. They used they would make fun of them. Like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I do think what that illustrates is the degree to which there is a strong kind of like cultural rejection that is rooted very much in, again, this American Republican ethos of like deep suspicion of like large governments. Again, this idea that a man who works is a man who who takes care of his family and values it's just like you're not going to overcome that. And so like I think trying to rehash the welfare state or try to, I get it, like you don't want anybody to be homeless, you don't want anybody to starve. I agree. I do wish that weren't the case. But I think there's a limit to like how much you're going to get mass support for these things, because again, the way that we've been socialized in this context to think about what it says about people who get these things. And then of course, in America, we live in a racist society. So like people have associated these programs with Black people. And so like, again, like you can't just erase all of that history. And so I just would rather us not go back to the same idea. These are debates that people had centuries ago. Like, I want us to like think about these things in a new light instead of reaching for what was said about it in the past or like what was done about it in the past. Like, we're not there anymore. Like that world, that ship has sailed.
Right. So we got through all of Amanda's 4 claims. So then at the end, one of the 20 Black conservatives can bring their claim to Amanda and defend it. And this claim was Black people as a community need to leave the Democratic Party. And Amanda, she actually agreed with that. Not to say like, oh, well, going to Republican is the answer, because she mentioned that too. Like, both parties are, not in the best interest of Black people, period.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that, and then after this, maybe we can go through. There were some comments I wanted to respond to.
Oh, yeah.
So here's my thing with the parties. The Democratic Party is what it is. They are a professional class. So party is really a misnomer, because originally the way the parties were structured was supposed to be a robust place to actually discuss kind of the structure of the political economy, like really big questions. But after the Civil War, the parties more or less came to a tacit agreement that too much had been put on the table. In other words, too much had been put on the table in terms of like what was actually up for debate. Like, pre-Civil War, like we were having whole conversations about would America have a capitalist economy or not? Like, what was the role of wage labor? Like, how would previously enslaved people be integrated into a bourgeois economy, allegedly? But then we also had the Industrial Revolution. Like, we were having big discussions. And this is really obvious, really all the way up until like very recently, when I do my archival work and seeing the way that people talked about things back in like the 60s and 50s, like they're having big conversations about like, again, the trajectory of like American society, American capitalism, and like things like that. Now we're debating stuff like, whether or not just stupid shit. It's just like, so the parties are there to just like essentially pick around the edges, which is why most Americans just don't participate at all, because like the broader kind of like societal, society, I mean, more or less is nothing changes. Not anything in like a broad structural way. Like, sure, like you might get a policy here and there kind of at the margins, but like in the way that affects most people's day-to-day lives, like I don't think that it really changes much. And so the question is like, I'm not here to tell you not to vote for Democrats. I'm not here to tell you not to vote for anybody. What I'm here to ask is like, what do you reasonably expect that the parties are going to accomplish? They're not going to protect Black people. I hate that line. I think we need to move past the like paternalistic protection language. I think they're not going to reduce harm. Like neither one of the parties are going to do these things. Like they're going to claim, the Democrats are going to claim to like reduce harm or try whatever. But this is just a claim. Like it's all, they're all marketing agencies at this point. Mm-hmm. Like in between the major elections, both parties have all sorts of focus groups. They test messages, they test rhetoric. They get to see exactly what they can say so they can get a certain percentage of people to turn out, because really all you need is 50% plus one. Like it's all about really manipulating the electorate to ensure that, you know, you get exactly how many votes you need to win. And then you move on to the next one. Like the whole question of like these bigger kind of structural issues that we're discussing today are never brought up by either of the parties. Mm-hmm. And so like, again, I think telling people that they shouldn't vote for the Democratic Party, I'm not willing to do that, because like that's ultimately a decision you have to make for yourself and what you think is the point of politics. Now, some people might say, well, they both suck, but who's going to harm me the least? Okay, I mean,
that's how I think about it. Like,
yeah. Although I'm not convinced that that's even a question that you can to me, it's a moot point. But if you think that's an interesting question, I'm not here to tell you that it's not one to raise. And I'm not convinced that either party is necessarily better or worse than that. I think that they both have collectively, not in like, again, I try to frame this in a way that's not just like, they're just, you know, twiddling their fingers in the evil conference room trying to do this to us. But it's more like, they are there, the parties are there to make sure that American capitalism stays on good footing. And American capitalism staying on good footing means immiserating more and more of the population.
Well, I'm going to die on the hill saying that we would not be in the current situation like where something is going on every single day, just some type of lunacy. Well, like if Hillary was in office or if Kamala was in office. And the reason why they're not in office, I mean, I think, you know, it's obvious and clear why they're not. But yeah, well, I don't think that if Hillary was in office or Kamala, we would be like day to day, like, you know, Trump attacking the media or just some other stupid thing that's going on. So
I don't think it's clear and obvious why they're not in office. But beyond that, people also need to understand, like, Trump is a television star. He knows what's going to get attention. He understands we live in an attention economy, and we're too dumb to recognize it because we just react to everything he does. The thing is, like a lot of the policies that Biden, there isn't that much difference between, especially when it comes to foreign policy. There really is a lot of continuity between the two parties. It's just that the Democrats are really opaque about things. Like they just don't. They're much bigger on, like, you know, public relations, which public relations, for those who don't know, public relations used to be called propaganda in the 1920s. But then after World War II in the Nazi regime, the term propaganda took on a negative connotation that it didn't used to have before then. And the Democratic Party was really the party that really perfected public relations or propaganda. And so the Democrats are there to propagandize, and they're really good at it. So good at it that really, like, they're almost too good at it, because they promise all these things and they say all these things, but they never do anything. So they create a lot of disillusionment, but they don't really care about that because, again, they're not about like trying to actually raise participation. In fact, they don't want too many people to vote. They've said this before, like they don't want too many people to vote, because if too many people start voting, then there's a lot of it's a little unpredictable as who they might vote for. So the Democratic Party is there to throw red meat to people like us, essentially, people who, I always say, like the MSNBC, the CNN, I get my news from social media crowd, like that's who they're there for. But for the vast majority of the country, like they just don't care about. Whereas Trump is like a showboater. So like even though Biden was throwing kids in cages and stuff at the border too, they just didn't talk about it. Whereas Trump is going to like celebrate this. Now, one might say, well, it's better to have a president who doesn't celebrate these things versus one who does. My whole thing is, sure, that might be the case, but like, is it? I mean, if the actions are still the same, then like, why are we just only focusing on the rhetoric? Like, why do that's the thing with our politics. Like, we don't know how to do anything beyond interpret, or not even interpret, other than like react to rhetoric, because we don't even interpret it. We don't actually look beneath the surface. We don't actually go read what's being said in these things. We just react to the little headline. We just react to the caption. We just react to, you know, the top line, which is exactly what Trump wants us to do, because that then leaves him free to do the other things that he wants to do, that are much less sexy to talk about, but are probably much more, you know, efficacious from the standpoint of like altering the trajectory of society. So my whole thing is like, I want us to move beyond just like looking at the rhetoric and actually looking at the policies.
All right. Well, we did hit our hour mark, and look, I feel like we can go another hour, but I want you to go and respond to some of the comments that, you know.
Okay, so yeah, let me go back up. Okay, so all right, so someone said I might be too skeptical. This is Rich the Fish at 12:55. Said I might be too skeptical, but I think people tend to paint capitalism as his overarching evil. But I'm not sure we would not complain about socialism, just the name under it. Oh, I agree. That's why I try not to like turn. I always say capitalism is not just something. It's not a. First off, it's not a thing. It's just a name we give to civilization or society at any given point in time. Like, you can call it whatever you want. And I agree that the thing is, humans are meaning-making creatures. So they're always going to find things to complain about, things to be concerned about, things that stresses them. All of that, stress, concern, all these things are historical questions. So like, that's not going to change. My whole thing is like, capitalism has a very particular problem that I think manifests itself in like all of society, which is to me that whole like baseline feeling of you know, never being able to reach your full potential, because you're essentially having to subordinate most of your actions to the whims of you know, the person that you're selling your labor to. So like, most people would probably in any given day, I would venture to say most people would probably rather be doing anything other than what they're doing at work. To me, that is a fundamental rejection of the human capacity to be creative, which is what humans are. They're creatives. And so like, because capitalism suppresses the creative energies in us in a way that I think is really troublesome, I think also the way that capitalism alienates us from not only our work, the things we do, like we don't have much control over that a lot of times, but also to each other. Like, there's loneliness epidemics, the way that it's completely upended the family, the way that you know, we're losing communities. Like, all of these things are like rooted in, I think, this very basic kind of alienating kind of impulse of capitalism. And so my whole thing is like, okay, can we deal with that? And then we can focus on other issues after that. But like, yeah, I don't try to say that socialism is a panacea. I think socialism is addressing one specific issue within capitalism. But there's all sorts of things that capitalism has done well and historically. Like, I mean, again, like we can't doo-doo without, like, my third grade teacher used to be like, don't doo-doo on those who do. I used to like the phrase. But anyway, yeah, capitalism has done a lot. I mean, it has raised living standards lots of places. Now, it's done that through all sorts of violent means, but like, the reality is it has. So yeah, I'm not anti anything. I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm just like, I think capitalism had a historical function. It's fulfilled that. Let's try something else.
Yeah, I mean, took the words out right out my mouth. So let's see. I'll do maybe two more. I just want to know, are people letting the dislike of Amanda overrule the substance of what she was saying?
Probably. You know, I'll try to I mean, I can't speak for other people. I don't dislike Amanda. I don't know her. I try not to have parasocial relationships with people because I think it's weird. So I don't know her. I'm sure she is lovely to her friends and all these other things. So all I can go based on is what she says. And so I do try to take people at their word. I try to read people in good faith. I try to give credit where credit is due, but I also like to register my differences and my disagreements when I have them. I can't speak for anybody else though.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and knowing Amanda, I'm not that big of a hater to say, well, just because I dislike her, I'm not going to hear her out on these issues. And I hope people, I have my fun on Pop Roast or whatever, but still, like, I can have like a great conversation where, yeah, she did make some points and she does make points. I still think she's smart. I think she's funny, but as always, I think she just gets in her way a lot. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. So yeah, I guess we could cap it here because we're going.
Why are people blocking people in the chat? What's going on here?
Oh, I guess it's good. Got some randoms in the chat. I don't have my mods today. I only have 2.
Oh, don't be blocking people, y'all. It's not that deep. Like, it really isn't. Like, we all are figuring it out. There are no blueprints. There are no right or wrong answers. There is no black box that we need to uncover to like get the solution to anything. Like, none of that exists. We're all just animals on a rock who, because we're meaning-making creatures, like come up with all sorts of like elaborate explanations for like why we're just doing what we do as animals, which is try to reproduce our existence. Like, it's really not that deep. And so like blocking people over this is just really not necessary.
And also, I want you to recommend the books that you said on Twitter. I'm trying to look for it right now. Oh, so the first one is The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual by Harold Cruz.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, you also put Black Visions, The Roots of Contemporary African-American Political Ideologies. Then another book is titled What the Negro Wants.
Written in 1934, right as World War II was winding down. Yeah.
Yes, with essays by a ton of people.
Yeah, Mary McLeod Bethune, W.B. Du Bois, I think A. Philip Randolph is in there. It's a pretty hard-hitting list.
And then last, Who Speaks for the Negro by Robert Penn Warren.
If you really want some tea, read that one because they be dragging, like the girls were tussling in that one. Like, somebody called James Baldwin like a white liberal, ass liquor. Like, it got deep in that. So like,
wow.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Black people had
it's nothing new. It's nothing.
No, like, Black people have had very, very detailed debates about like the plight of like Black people in America and like what they should be doing. Like, this isn't new. Like, it's been much more robust than anything we're doing today, which is just frankly oftentimes just nonsensical.
Okay, well, I will make sure to put those 4 books in the description after this video. I want to thank you, Jared, for sharing your brilliance. As always, y'all, I am proud that he is one of my best friends. Tell them, let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, so like I put my name here, JC Tiger Fan, on Twitter or Instagram. So yeah, find me on there.
Yeah, and thank y'all so much for joining us. Like, we had a full packed classroom today. Really excited about that.
Classroom.
That's what I call it, And if you enjoyed this, if you love the content, please follow, please like and subscribe. Clip us and share us on social media so people can find out about this conversation that we're having. I love having this type of like diverse content on my channel. And also, speaking of that, for the Bravo fans, I'm getting back on here at 2:00 to do my review for Real Housewives of Miami. So yeah, y'all gonna get the best of both worlds today. Anywho, y'all, with that, we will see you for our 52nd episode.
Wow.
So, bye, y'all.